So welcome back to the RV Falcor. The time is 7:15. We are at a depth of 4,920 meters, proceeding southwest towards the Hot Chimlet vent site. It's about 40 meters ahead of us in the dark, so we expect to have the bottom in sight very soon. So time now has just gone 7:15 aboard the RV Falcor. It is Saturday morning, June the 29th, and Nereus is at a depth of 4,935 meters. We are about 35 meters from our primary target for today, the Hot Chimlet site. We've just had the vehicle steady up just to make sure we're getting good navigational fixes so we know precisely where we are in three-dimensional space relative to our base maps. And very soon we'll be moving off again and getting down to the seafloor to start our dive. So we've arrived at the seafloor. We've arrived at the seafloor. This is RV Falcor's Nereus dive 63. See some large anemones ahead, I believe, on a rocky seabed. Depth is 4985. We're in pursuit of the hot chimlet site, which we think is a few meters below us and ahead of us on this kind of bearing. And we come out to the right and then back into the left afterwards. I'll get you away from the edge of the wall. Try and keep the seafloor, yeah. Yeah. It's a matter of... Yeah, so we just fly along this contour and keep the seabed in sight on our left. There we go, there's some bright white stuff straight ahead. So I think if you come down, Chris, because that's above the hot chimlet site, so this paler patch, I would aim for this lower patch just there. And that's almost certainly the big shrimp wall. There's some more things up here, but let's start down here. I think I might see a marker sticking up from the rock just there. So we believe what we can see right in front of us. Oh, hang on, no, that's silly. That's an anemone. We're much closer into the seafloor than I was thinking. I'm very sorry. Can we pan up with that camera? See what's ahead of us? Okay, it's not going to be very helpful. Okay, sorry. Now I think we're seeing individual just light rocks there. We probably need to be looking at these larger scale cameras. So welcome aboard the RV Falcor for Nereus Dive 063. The time is just coming up for 7:30. We are at the seafloor on the north side of the Picard hydrothermal field. So we're approaching the cliff wall. We're about the right depth, we're in about the right place. Casey even thinks he recognises the same rock that he had to do battle with yesterday to get around it to get to the hydrothermal field. I'm not sure if that's an anemone in that picture clinging to the rock or a patch of shrimp around the far side of it. Yep, that's correct, 4984 is the depth. And we are indeed in the right place, I think. I think these are the two places where we measured temperature yesterday, so hot chimney should be just ahead of us to the left. And then when we get there, Casey, we're going to want to swing around and do the same climb uphill, but let's get there, get ourselves oriented, and then we can lock in all our navigation. For those of you watching at home, this is a good example of the equivalent of a triangulation point used for hill walkers. That if you're hiking around mountains in fog or in the dark, a lot of things can look alike, and there's a way to unambiguously know you're in the right place is if you can find some purposely deployed marker or some benchmark anywhere on the surface of the planet, and that's what we use these markers for. Although we have very good navigation that allows us to get to places from one place to another, there can always be offsets from one day to another. Things can sometimes get a bit confusing, so if we put down some markers in key places and we can relocate those, then that allows us to lock in from one day to the next where everything else should be relatively. From there we can use our range and bearing, tracking our motion across the seafloor to get to different places. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be especially good rock, Casey, but anything that was fluffy. Yep. So we can see this rock's covered in furry microbes. We want to collect some of that. And then you can see some sites of fluid flow just beyond that with a lot of shrimp associated with them. When it comes to the microbes, we can just pick up a loose boulder anytime. But the key thing is the microbiology that Julie wants to study. We learnt the hard way last year that trying to scrape the microbes off the rock doesn't work, trying to vacuum them off with the slurp gun doesn't work. Whereas just picking up a loose bit of rock that actually has the microbes already attached works just fine. It's not great for the geologists because the loose boulders are the most corroded and altered. So we're doing our best to get one of these samples for Julie, and the experience we're having is that the rock is actually a lot tougher than we predicted. We thought And a little bit we see keep escaping downhill. The other thing we have to bear in mind when we're doing this with Nereus is because it's a battery-powered vehicle. It's a rather delicate little thing. It's easy to bounce ourselves off the hillside when we're trying to actually break off a rock sample. And coupled to that, we can't take too large a rock sample because we have a limited payload that we have to stay within. We're loaded up with our own science equipment today, so we don't have much wherewithal to collect anything extra. So a little knobbly bit sticking out just down the bottom there, casting a shadow.
This is a loose piece right here.
Okay.
That one in the crack there.
Okay.
I just messed with it.
Alright.
Of course it's in a crack now.
Right. Well, this is good practice when I ask you to pick up that marble later.
That would probably be useful. Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, you could use the slurp sampler. I know you'd cheat. You'd outsmart me. It's really cool. Now when you hold it, once you have it safely over the bio box, could I ask that we just pan in and get a picture of it before we drop it in there? And we can already see, but we're not going to stop to show it to you too carefully just yet. We're going to make sure. Do you need to pan down on the camera? So that's good. We can see where it's actually going to go. And you can see still the microbes wafting on the rock. That's a beautiful sample, Casey. Thank you very much. So put that safely in there. And that's our first sample of the day complete. We have some of the microbial mat from the furry walls area. And we'll put the lid back on, and we don't expect to reopen that bio box today. While we're here, would it be possible to get some nice video of the rock that it came from as well, please? Okay, we'll do that next. No. Yeah, sample 2 will be the filming when we set that back up. So we have our first sample, and what we're going to do now is, well, I think some of both. So I think what we can do is then with this camera we can pan up and frame it so we don't have the basket and things in it, and get the nicest picture we can with this camera. But I think it'd be kind of cool to get some of the zoom as well and get that as good as we can. So in fact, while we're sitting here, it might be to... Yeah, that's good. If we pan down, how quickly do we... Oh, yeah, okay. Ah, it's more than one way to get the arm out of the field of view. Would that be possible, just to get it framed nicely? Thank you. What we're doing now, we figured since we're here and these are such gorgeous looking features, we're going to try and get some nice high definition video. The camera we're using, the primary camera that you're seeing the feed from, is the one donated to us by James Cameron recently, along with the Deep Sea Challenger vehicle. We've had Cliff Pombriand out here and Daniel Gomez Ibanez before him on leg one, doing everything they can to make this camera work as well as possible, along with all of James Cameron's team back ashore. So we figure it's only right and proper that we show our appreciation by collecting some of the nicest video we can while we're here to share with everybody, because that's exactly what the aim of the gift was to share this with us. So we're just setting up. I'm going to set the vehicle up first, then we'll set the camera up, and then we'll be collecting some nice video. So we're just powering down the camera and then powering it back up again, just to make sure we've got full control of all the zoom, well, not the zoom, but the focus and iris control that we want for both the wide angle field of view and for the zoomed in field of view cameras. And we'll collect a couple of minutes of footage from each perspective, and then we'll be moving on with our sampling program, heading over to find the black smokers that we call BB vents 1 to 5. count this video highlight as sample 002.
Starboard inner.
It's 11:57:30. This is a video sample we're taking. Next is 3362Y of 5212. Depth is, heading is 285, and our depth is 4980 meters.
Just sitting here for a few.
Yeah. So while we're sitting here, I can tell you, we don't really know much about these microbes. We just know that they grow in abundance around the periphery of where all the other hydrothermal activity lives. The shrimp that live around the diffuse flow. We have anemones that prey on the shrimp as filter feeders. And then these things live kind of where the water wafts around in the general vicinity of these vent sites. So basically the substrate is the same rocky sulfides as you can see in the background of the same view. It's mostly iron sulfides with other metals, copper and zinc in them. But the difference being that in some patches, but it's very localized, near the top of the mound, there's this area that we came to call the furry walls, which just has these microbial filaments wafting in the breeze, somehow making a living. Quite gorgeous to look at. So what we'll do in about 30 seconds, Casey, is I'll ask you to, if we can switch between the cameras. Let's give it another 20 seconds. Okay, now let's switch cameras, and we'll switch to our zoomed in camera and get right in and look at this in some detail. Yeah, let's call the next sample 003, please, Leighton. And now, even you at home, even though you're thousands of miles away, as well as the fact that what Nereus is looking at is thousands of meters beneath me, we can see in exquisite detail the textures of this material. So the orangey brown is the iron sulfide, or in fact the rock will have initially been precipitated at high temperature as polymetallic sulfides formed at hundreds of degrees Celsius. And then after it's precipitated and cooled, it's begun to rot away, it's fallen downhill to appear as a loose boulder here, where we're looking at it. And then the outside of it has begun to rust. The orange colour is basically the same kind of thing you get as in metal on land. As it turns rusty, the iron oxide that forms is that bright orange colour. And from that, can we pan up just a little bit more, Casey? It's really nice to be able to see the filaments off the edge against the water. That's great, thank you. And what we're going to do now is just optimize the view here. But these filaments, they're just basically individual long strands. They're probably not that different in size and shape, you know. Individual strands there aren't that much thinner when we get the rock back than the optical fibre that Nereus is being suspended by. So you imagine something like that wafting in the breeze, only it's 3,000 meters long. That's basically what's connecting Nereus to the rest of us. One of the things we're finding here is when we try to focus, it's hard to know which part of the image we're focusing on because of course it's all continuously moving. So could we pan up a little bit more, maybe put that at the bottom of the picture, that line there? That's good, thank you. So we're just going to sit here a little longer and enjoy the view. We'll be moving on very soon. Chip is awake and ready to go chasing after the black smokers. So this is the peace and calm before we go and look at the hot boiling turbulence of the black smoker chimneys, which will be our next stop on today's tour of the Picard hydrothermal field. It's the world's deepest hydrothermal vent. We're starting off with some soothing, calm, ease yourself into the day, ease yourself into the weekend video. These microbial filaments wafting in the breeze at 4,980 meters. We're then going to head over to the hottest black smokers we know, which look something like an industrial wasteland when you get there. Just pure metal deposits, a few shrimp living around, but not many animals making a living there. And then we'll go on to the BB Woods site, which actually is a much more established and older hydrothermal field. It still has black smokers, not quite as hot, and covered with shrimp. It's an absolutely gorgeous site, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that for the first time this voyage. And then, if all goes according to plan, we'll end the day by heading over to the BBC mound, which is an area full of diffuse flow and teeming with shrimp. And a particular favourite of ours is a place called Shrimp Gully. So we'll stay here another 30 seconds, Casey, and then we'll be ready to get moving. Okay, so let's switch back to the wide-angle view, please, on the cameras, and then we'll be ready to head to BB Vents. It's time for Texas. Chip's in the room. He's had 3 cans of Dr. Pepper already to get himself buzzed up for today. He should have perhaps shared one with Barrio. Could we just pan up a little bit and get a little bit more video while we're here? Unadulterated? That's nice. It's very nice. Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. So we're ready to move off in pursuit of BB Vents. So our best navigation method is going to be recognizing stuff we've seen before and pattern recognition on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, the DVL is good. It's just, it's initialized
Yeah.
to this.
Sure. No, okay.
Let's turn south and work
Let's
our way slowly up.
head us way south, and if we're going to trend anything, Casey, I think we're going to want to trend to our left as we're going south. More southeast than southwest, right?
Yes, yes.
So let's get ourselves on a due south heading to get started. And I'll look for patterns on the seafloor. And I'll feel it in my bones. How about that? So farewell to the furry walls. This will be our last visit to the furry walls this trip. We certainly hope that to be true. If things go like they do at the first dive to Picard, we could see them 7 more times today trying to find the black smokers. Bye, furry walls. We love you.
Thanks for being so fluffy.
And in fact, although we're saying goodbye to the furry walls, we are bringing the furry walls home with us as well in the bio box.
Furry walls forever.
Only trouble being, to stop them being microbially contaminated, Julie won't let us stroke the furry walls. Boo. Well, there's a lot of shrimp in front of us right now. That's not so boring.
There we go. Now we're cooking up bacon.
So, we're now on a heading of 260 degrees. We're swinging around towards our west. Our depth is 4,979 meters. And we're beginning to work our way up slope. These little crevices with plenty of diffuse flow. We sampled a couple of the sites like that already this cruise. I think that's one of the ones we tried sampling. I don't think so. I don't remember seeing sparse shrimp like this yesterday.
They all look the same.
It's a really pretty pattern here, actually. Is there any chance we could pan the camera up so we're not looking at the basket? Are you safe doing that? Let's count this as another video highlight, please, Leighton, because this is a different distribution we've seen. This is sparse shrimp. It's kind of pretty just looking at how they're spread out over the rocks here. Thank you. Okay, that was great actually, thanks Casey. That was enough of that for my happiness and well-being. At 30 frames a second, we'll definitely be able to extract a nice still frame from that of the shrimp spread out. We've seen both these kinds of behavior, what I've been used to seeing in other hydrothermal fields I've studied in the past, is having shrimp in huge clusters around areas of fluid flow. What's much less usual is to see them spaced out like this. I've seen it once on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, but then we've seen it at the Von Dam hydrothermal field as well. And now we've seen it here near the BB vent site. And our target depth for the vents themselves was 49.58, from what I remember. Look like there's shrimp in a gully over to your left. Maybe it's just more white stuff, but might be an easier way to get out of trouble anyway. Swinging around closer to the heading we want to be following. More furry walls. Told you we hadn't said goodbye to them yet. We're coming into these anemones. So, from my Dead Reckoning skills, such as they are, when you come out of the furry walls and get into the anemones, the chimneys move you just around the far side of the hill to the left.
And what chimney are we sampling?
We're going to those high temperature black smoker chimneys, and what we're going to be doing is flying up above them to do chip super sampling. So we want to set up right at the base of one and do the same thing again that we do samples.
I'll just pretend I'm going to try to take a fluid sample and I'll
Yeah,
be
if you set up like the fluid sample, then that'll be in the right place to start what Chip wants to do.
Oh yeah, because I got to poke the vents.
Yeah, that's right. So we're within a few meters of our target depth.
This is where you do the CDD glass line. This is where the outputs where you put a proper massive amount of anemone.
Yeah.
I would assign a plus or minus 25 to the US.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge field. So, I mean,
And I think we know the chimneys are on the south side, if anything, of the shallowest point, Casey, so if things are still uphill to the right, we're probably on the north side of the hill still.
Yeah.
We want to get...
What I don't want to do is drive over it and try to drop down.
Correct.
Does not work.
Yeah. I think all this abundance of anemones is probably worth going round that way, that kind of arc. Because that would bring us up sort of like downhill near the bases of the chimneys rather than up high. Absolutely gorgeous. Can we log that as a sample number for this bit of video? There's a massive anemone field. There's shimmering fluid, isn't there, coming up around those? They're not just wafting the... Okay, that's the end of that. Thanks, Leighton. What fantastic views. I'm afraid for those of you listening at home, I've been left speechless. Okay, you're a little...
Anything that's a target 10 meters away, we're at about
You're about the
depth.
right depth.
Now it'll have us turning east, correct?
Yeah. So we're heading pretty much south and still going uphill. Large blocks of sulfide in front of us. More anemones. Some finger-like things in the top of that. A large stump of dead chimney, I think.
We're probably much shallower than we used to be there.
I think we are now. It's
We're 2 meters shallower. And we're 4.954.
Yep.
Can you look up what depth we were at when we were at BB Vent 4? The other day, 4.
They would be there.
It must have been 5 days ago, I think. So okay, Mario spotted them while we were debating what to do. And you can see the series of chimneys just there and all their smoke. So I think maybe if you drop down to your right, Casey.
That's where we sampled one before.
Yeah. And that'll get you under the smoke and make sure you don't get swept away. Yeah. And how far away does that put us right now? Okay. I think some of the chimneys are still down to your right. So when we came here earlier in the cruise, about 5 days ago, we had the repeated problem that if we got too close to the vents, we got swept up by them, pushed up into the water column, got lost in the black smoke, and it took us forever to get back down to the seafloor and find them again. But happily, today we've come prepared, and we're actually underneath. You can see the black billowing smoke. On the top of your screen, that's from the plumes, but we're actually going to come in underneath the plume so we don't get swept into the violent jets. And then we'll be able to set up at the base of the chimneys.
So where am I going?
Down to your right.
That's my black spot.
Yeah. But the top of the screen is theirs. See it.
The smoke circle? Kind of incredibly difficult to do if I can't see.
Orange smoke goes.
If you need to go anyway to take evasive action, if you go to right from here, that would take you out into deeper water, and
Like
that would allow you to...
off mine here. You gonna do a vent fluid sample first?
No, we're just going to set up, but if we set up like a vent fluid sample, that's one of the chimneys right in front of you there. Nicely done. It's amazing, if you come in at slightly too high on these chimneys, you basically get swept up in their smoke. But the nature of these things, because they're so hot and the fluid coming out of them is so buoyant, it actually, as it mixes turbulently, entrains the local seawater and sweeps it all up. So you end up with very clear fluid just below the...
So is this what we want, this thing right here?
Yes, if you see that black smoker just there, that's the same one we sampled earlier, and Chip wants to do basically a repeat of the same experiment and get some more data from the same place.
Does look like we're good there.
It's one you've said hello to before. And I think the right hand one, Chip, does that look?
Coming at it from a different angle, so I can't. Didn't we do BB before?
Yeah, this is... The others are uphill to our left, so this is the one downhill.
Yeah.
It's the furthest one of the four that are close to each other. There's another one that's way below.
Yeah.
It may have been sampled some more by the Shinkai in the last couple of days. That's why it looks slightly different again as well.
30 meters southwest is where it is. These targets match the map from a guy 5 days ago.
Actually, if you don't mind, we'll take some time to do some... Once Casey's set up and stable, we will take the time to collect some video as well, because we've got some
Oh yeah.
I just called
fantastic views, and we've done some work tidying up how the cameras work since we were last here. So
like we're on different
we'll do that, and then we'll get straight into your experiment.
Turn off and just browse.
So we're just going to sit here for a short while, and what's actually going to naturally happen over the next few minutes, I suspect. Are you having to thrust to hold position here?
Yes.
So we might continue to stir up some of the brown
Yeah, I'm
material.
pressing into the rocks for 5 days.
Okay. Well, I suspect that what's going to happen through time is we'll give it a few minutes to see if we're lucky. But it should well be that that the violence of the vent sites themselves will actually help clear our field of view. But basically what we're looking at here are temperatures fluids that we measured earlier in the week. They have temperatures approaching 400 degrees Celsius. They're very hot and acidic. They're basically inside those chimneys we're looking at. The fluid is a saturated solution and a clear fluid, but a saturated solution full of hydrogen sulfide and dissolved metals. And what's happening is as soon as that material comes out into the seawater at 4 degrees Celsius, it becomes a supersaturated solution, so it starts quenching and precipitating minerals, which are going to be rich sulfides, the same material that makes up the chimney itself. But now it's actually forming these very fine-grained particles which rise up turbulently. We've traced this plume up. We're at 4,956 meters, and this rises up to 4,100 meters, so nearly a kilometer upwards with the buoyancy and the turbulence. And what we're about to do now, or rather what we did earlier in the week, was we took the end-member vent fluid samples from these chimneys, which Jeff and his team, including Sean Silver and our student Jill McDermott, have been analysing to understand the composition of the fluid coming out of the rock underneath, to understand the processes that happen between the rock and the water below the seafloor. And the experiment we're going to do next is with Chip Breyer, who's built a special sampler that can actually draw in the water and particle mixes and study what happens at different heights above the plume, so we understand the impact that these chemicals have once they enter the ocean. A lot of the reactions that dictate how important hydrothermal activity is to global chemical budgets all happens in the hour. If you're looking at the fluid coming out of the vent orifice right now, in the next hour it's going to rise 800 meters in this buoyant plume, and a lot of the impact that this vent has on ocean chemistry, and all vents have on ocean chemistry, happens in that first hour after eruption, when dilutions happen very quickly. So that's basically what we're going to be doing, is taking samples from multiple heights above the vent site. So we can see the water's clearing here, so let's count that as our next sample. Leighton is going to be the video. Should be sample 06. Time is 12:30. And we're getting some nice video there. We can actually see some of the white mineralogy as well, and makes for some nice contrast. Can we pan a little to the left with the picture, Casey, or do we end up with an arm in the view? I think having that family of black smokers is really quite nice. That's great.
Looks like a rock does on the field.
Yeah, it kind of blends in, doesn't it? So you can't really tell the arms there, but later on we can measure it for scale as well. So let's get 2 minutes looking like that. What I'd like to do then is perhaps if we can switch to the zoom lens, take the time to look at that little white chimney over there, and then we'll do some looking at this big black smoke orifice right in front of us, which is the one that we're going to be doing our sampling around.
Is there much of a temperature difference between the little ones and the giant ones?
There probably isn't. The little ones, can you see how they have little black wispy cones? They almost look like an ice cream cone, but black. They're things called beehive diffusers. We're going to see some really big ones of those later on when we go to BB Woods. And those things, the way they're growing, they're really porous and friable. If we did touch one, it would just explode into a big powder puff. But the water comes out and leaks through that honeycomb texture. That's why they're called beehives. So the temperatures there tend to be a little bit lower, but only because they're just mixing with seawater just as they come through that mineral interface. What makes the difference between this site and the one at BB Woods is, if you look at this chimney in the near ground, it's got a really solid wall. You can actually see from the inside to the outside of the chimney, you can actually see the thickness of that wall. When these chimneys form, they initially precipitate almost like scaffolding. You can knock a chimney down and come back a day later and they started to grow. Sometimes we've seen chimneys that have grown back a meter in a day. But if you just touch them, they're very friable. And what happens is once they set up that scaffolding matrix, water's percolating out through them, and then other different minerals precipitate through time through each one. Okay, so I think that's made for hopefully some very nice video. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds. Let's keep it going for this one, because the smoke from the right keeps coming and going. But this is very nice now, very crisp and clear. Good job, James, helping us navigate here.
USBL bothers me.
Navigation bothers me.
That's right, jobs.
Finding stuff on the seafloor bothers me, but it's also my job, so I guess I just have to be bothered. If I wasn't bothered, I'd be unemployed.
But the navigation bothers me too, don't worry.
But we
Of course, the
found
danger is that I could just sit here all day and look at these things. They are pretty.
So what's our game? Is our game plan to take samples here, or are we going to be doing this moving up?
We're going to be doing the moving up.
So we're
So
going to need to have auto swap.
okay, that's another 12:34 and 30 seconds. Can we switch to the zoom camera now, please, Casey? And we'll make this. And the next one will be sample 7. Yeah.
Get right in there.
careful, we zoom in too much, it'll melt the camera. Careful. I have no idea where we are.
Set up with that first sample.
Good navigation. Setting camera somewhere. Is that the kind of stuff you want?
Yeah. And can you see now that
Yeah.
it's just coming out the little wispy? You can see those little. If there's one that's. If you can focus on that the ribbed texture, that's really kind of cool. I mean, these are little miniature versions of these beehives. We'll see ones that are about 6 meters tall this afternoon, I'm hoping. Trouble with the Schlieren effect is it's hard to get a focus on anything. But it's 12:36. Is zoom on mini beehives. So these are the little beehive diffusers we were telling you about, that they basically the fluids coming out of here are the same temperature as in the large orifice we're looking at. These are things that are growing back naturally, probably about the size of your fingers, each one of these features. The fluid coming out is about 400 degrees Celsius. And the ribbed texture to these things gives them the name beehive. And basically it's a little honeycomb porous texture. If you poked at those things, we've done this in the past, asked people to try and collect some of that mineralogy so you can understand the formation of the chimneys. And if you just touch them, they just dissolve in a puff of smoke, and they're basically made of the same material as the black smoker fluid coming out of the top of them. And what we're going to do shortly is pan slowly to our right. We're going to stay here for now. And then as we pan around, you can see more of this clear fluid, and then coming into view on the right hand side, let's pan down. And this is the main orifice we're going to be sampling, so let's bring that one into sharp focus now. So those little chimneys are going to grow up into something like their big brother just here. Can you pan a little further right, Casey? There we go, let's get the whole of that chimney in view. That's nice, you can see it's very sharply focused now around the rim of the chimney. Yeah, please. And down a little bit more. Very fine, delicate, yeah. I think if we get that rim in the center of the field, that brings that into sharper focus better. And focus this side of where the fluid's happening. I'm just going to go a little bit right, that's it. Just there. So now you can actually see, you can almost see the concentric rings, almost like tree rings, from the inside to the outside of this chimney. As it's grown through history, you actually get different zonation, that the water doesn't just come up through the central pipe, but it actually can leak out through the edges as well. And what that means is there are different conditions of temperature and pressure and fluid composition from the inside to the outside leaking through the walls of the chimney, and so different minerals precipitate in different places. So our colleague Meg Tivey and her PhD student Guy Evans back at Woods Hole have been working on that. They're working in collaboration with Jeff and Jill and Sean to understand the composition of the fluid and the composition of the sulfides that go with them. And there's no better way to understand how the sulfides relate to the fluids than to get the sulfides from the same place that the fluids come from. And then there's one little shrimp here, coming up towards the edge. Remembering these are non-seeing shrimp. So we'll see how clever this one is, whether he manages to avoid the very hottest fluids. We know that life can exist up to temperatures of 122 degrees Celsius, but the fluids in here are more close to 400 degrees Celsius.
We want the stuff on the side.
No, I think we'll take...
You want that video or with the light up the side?
I want
Or dark and cloudy?
So I hope you're enjoying this view as much as I am. These are the world's deepest and hottest black smoke, or deepest black smoke as we know. They're amongst the world's hottest. Just collecting some video from this site, and then once we've done that, we'll actually start our experiment with Chip, who's patiently been standing by waiting for things to get going. But absolutely spectacular systems.
I want to share this view too. It's pretty good view of everything.
Yeah, we'll do that in a moment. Okay, let's call that the end of that sample, Leighton. And what I'd like to do, Casey's had the great idea, can we just share the view, switch the camera view of what's being fed out to the web to this view? I think it's ROV2 down here, which actually shows all the black smokers out ahead of us. I think in terms of... So we're just going to switch the view away from the high definition camera. The quality won't be quite so good of what we show you, but now you can see from a different perspective. The near chimney is the one we've been zoomed in on with our high definition cameras, but you can see this is one of four. This is BB vent 4. You can see BB vents 1, 2 and 3 in a line ahead of us. All four of these are contributing to the fluids gushing out of the seafloor. There's a fifth one further downhill to our right. You can see the smoke wafting in from that direction, but it's this BB vent 4 that's the one that we sampled at the start of the week, and that's the one that we're going to continue experimenting with now. So I think, Casey, if you want to go to the wide-angle view again on the high-definition camera, and Leighton, if we can switch back to that as well. And then we're going to get ready to do Chip sampling. So Chip, you would like the super sampler in the manipulator hand to start with. Yep.
Yes, please.
So what we're getting ready to do now is an experiment with Chip Breyer with his super sampler. We're going to pick up his the sampling snorkel for the his system, and what that has is both a tube inlet, you can see coming out the back of it, this white coil snaking around the front of the basket. That's basically curled up tubing that will actually pump water into his samplers, which are at the back of the basket. And what's attached to the front of that, there's both a metal rod for the first meter of the inlet of his fluids, so they cool down, so they don't get so hot that they melt the plastic, but there's also a temperature probe, which is the same electronics and the same thermocouple system that Jeff Seawald has in his gas-tight fluid samplers. Jeff's already collected some of this fluid earlier in the week and got very good samples, so he doesn't need any more of that. He's saving his 2 bottles for a different study. But we're going to use the thermal probe here just to reconfirm what the highest temperature is from this site. So our next sample, Leighton, would be sample number 9, and we'll make that the temperature measurement in the end member. Yes, because then what the chip will do is then move up. He's not actually going to draw any of the 400 degree fluid into this sampler. He'll then, yeah, and what we'll actually see is, no, we're going to keep using the same sample inlet, but he'll just hold the temperature probe in the black smoker to measure the temperature, and then he's going to raise it up just an inch or 2 above, and we'll see how much the temperature drops off. And then he'll draw the samples at increasing height above the plume to go. This is BB Vent 4. Or you can call it BV4 to save yourself typing so much. So we've got hold of the temperature sensor, and what we're going to do now is measure the end member temperature. And you can do duplicate whole water samples. So you can do duplicate whole water samples at each height. Is that how you set it up, or you can do filter capsule and whole water?
No filter capsules. So,
Do off to one side,
one off to one side.
and probably do 3 different heights, or
Yeah,
2
we'd
or
say
3
there's
here,
3 different,
without moving the vehicle.
Yeah.
and you can do pairs of each one? Or just one sample of each? How many samples you got?
Yeah.
Because if you did replicate pairs, they're going to be two different samples anyway. Yeah?
Yeah.
And that would give you 7 depths, because we can probably do 5, 10, and 15 meters are the only 3 we can do.
Yeah.
Or maybe do one background, you don't need 2
No.
of the background, but then 2 of the others, and we'll see how far up we can trace things.
Yeah.
175. 205. 226. 293. 227. 238. 356. 357. 260. 360. 372. 375. 380. 360. 205.
Can you set it more vertically?
215.
I think you're out the far side of it.
160. 220. 306. 328. 336. 325. 254. 270. 380. 259. 381. 256.
Was that good enough, Chip, for knowing kind of temperatures? You're happy with that? Okay, so we know that's a good black smoker. The hottest temperature we actually measured there was 380, but we recognize the chimney has been broken open. It's probably mixing in some seawater more than it was the other day. But we're happy this is a proper good black smoker fluid. So Casey, we're not going to need to go and do any more high temperature measurements with that. What we're going to do no, we're going to use it now, but we're going to do the different heights like we did with Chip before. So we'll do, first of all, so we're going to be keeping hold of the sampler, but what we're going to do now is actually go to different heights above the chimney, and Chip's going to draw water at different sites. So the first 4 sets of samples we'll do without moving the vehicle at all, and the first one will just reach out to one side away from where the black smoke is and draw in what the background water is that's being sucked into the plume. This is RV Falcor Nereus Dive 63. The next sample coming up is going to be sample 010. It's going to be a super sample for Chip, Briar. The first sample will be port 1, Chip.
Yes.
And these will all be whole water samples, is that correct? So that was, yeah, the sample type before was a temperature sample type, and the next thing is going to be a super sample because it's actually a water sample we're going to collect. That's correct. See, the snorkel is away from the edge of the basket, so it's going to be getting... Can we pan right, please, Mario? And down a little. And pan down, please. And if we could just see the... Then we can see the tip of the inlet there, Chip.
We can turn the basket
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Actually, can we get the tip up so that we can see it?
We're just lighting it up for you.
Is that good? That's just bring it over a little bit to the left. I don't really care that it's that much of a background. Just as long as it's not
Yeah.
this way we can see the...
Or you could hold it. You could hold it just down to the right, to the bottom of the chimney, if you like. How about that? Could we put the nozzle up, kind of just down there? And if it's deeper than the base, than where the orifice is, then that's pretty much what's being swept into the plume. Then that's great. Okay, if we can hold that there, please, Casey. So it's not starting the sample yet, but it's on its way. Leighton, I forgot to log what time it was when we did the temperature measurement. Could you remind me of that, please? 12:51. Thank you. So the first sample we're going to take, although Chip wants to mostly measure the plume itself, an important part of the dilution is not just understanding the fluid chemistry that Jeff's group are going to be measuring from the chimney that you can see in the top left of your picture, but also what the composition is of the seawater nearby that's being swept into it, because basically everything in a plume is a mixture of the two. The fluids you can see exiting the seafloor on the left in the next hour will get diluted 10,000-fold with ambient seawater. So that's why when we're actually looking for these plumes, the first thing we have to look for is not the temperature anomaly, although these things are extremely hot. By the time you dilute them 10,000-fold, the temperatures are rather meek and mild. But what we know from the chemical composition is that, for example, the iron concentration in the fluids coming out of there, but also things like the methane concentrations are, well, for the iron and manganese, the examples that I know best, the fluids there are 1 million-fold enriched over ordinary seawater concentrations. Iron and manganese are minerals that, or elements that naturally form metal oxides in seawater and precipitate, so there's very low concentrations of dissolved iron or dissolved manganese in ordinary seawater. But the secret event fluids is, as well as being very hot and very acidic, they're completely starved of all oxygen. And so that's what allows them to dissolve up very high concentrations of iron and manganese, 1 million times higher than seawater. So even after they're diluted 10,000-fold, that still leaves lenses of water at 4,200 meters above this vent site that are 100 times higher concentration than ordinary seawater. And it was relying on those kind of chemical enrichments that allowed us to come and find these vent sites in the first place. Starting in 2009, we actually came using Nereus and also using CTDs and shipboard and shore-based chemical measurements to track down where there might be chemical signals anywhere in the water column, which ultimately led to the discovery of the Picard hydrothermal field. We narrowed it down to within about 200 meters in our first cruise in 2009. In 2010, our colleague Doug Connolly from the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton came back with his colleagues John Copley and Bram Merton and tracked the site down even closer, that they actually got the first photographs that were reported from this site. And then when we came back in 2012, we were able to map out the site in some detail, work out where all the different venting sites are, and understand their precise locations and collect the first detailed samples. And now we're back here this year, able to start collecting time series studies of exactly what's going on and how it might be varying through time. We do already have some evidence that the Hot Chimlets site has changed composition since last year. So that's the end of the first super sample. Okay, so would you like us to move the manipulator arm to a target? Should we start, say, 6 inches above the chimney? We can always come down closer. But if you start at 6 and see what it's like, and then you can track the temperature measurements. And your target temperature is about 100 degrees? Okay. Once you get the arm in about the right place, Casey, we might need to switch to the zoom.
Oh, wait. Stop for a second.
Stop there, please.
The valve is advanced from what I know.
Oh, okay. Can we go back where we were?
Right there.
Okay. So there was a problem there. Sample 1 didn't get taken, so we're going to redo sample 1. So this will be a second attempt at sample 010, sample 10, super port 1, starting at 1304. Was it purged okay, Chip?
Oh, it's very well put.
So if you're just joining us, welcome aboard the RV Falcor. The time is 9:05 on Saturday morning on East Coast US time. We are perched at the base of BB vent number 4, one of 5 black smoker chimneys, sitting on top of the BB vents mound in the northwest corner of the Picard hydrothermal field.
These cameras all just froze. I might have to bail out here. Sorry, Chip.
Okay. So I need to stop.
So he's stowing the sampler. So if you just stand by if you're watching at home, I'm afraid we have some problems with the health of our optical fibre. You may have noticed our cameras glitching in and out. We figured the only safe thing to do is we've put the chip sampler back in the box, and we'll stand by and get back to you while the engineers run some diagnostics on the health of our optical fibre and how we proceed from here. Meantime, we've got really nice views of these black smokers. We can look at them. Apparently we can't touch them just now. So we've just been working out how to take some, and it doesn't need to be right in the orifice, but let's hold it right there, Casey. What are our temperatures like there? So you need to come up high. Are you happy there? Is that too? Okay, if we can lock that there, and let's get going with this sampling. Are you purging, Chip? Okay. Sing out as soon as you're ready to start sampling. Ah, the hose has snapped.
Shit.
So we're just doing some on-the-fly engineering and adaptation here on the Falcor. We can see that unfortunately the temperature suddenly leapt up of the fluid sample we were taking to above 200 degrees, and that didn't give enough time for the thermal exchange in the metal inlet to actually melt the end off the plastic hose that Chip was using to draw his sample with. So you can now see the hose is actually standing free of the rest of the manipulator. So we're going to try and find a different way to pick up the instrument package to offer the hose into the, get the hose in the plume without putting the manipulator in that same plume. So, Casey's found a way to salvage something from our operation. We can see that by holding the arm in one location just outside the plume, he can have the loose hose that's wafting away in the distance is being buffeted inside the plume. And we're going to find a way to actually get Chip the sample that he wanted from this location. We're just purging things at the moment. This is
Start the sample.
this is Super Port 2, is that correct? Very good.
Starting now.
If there's any way we can sample this quickly, it's looking good.
Yeah,
Yeah, the arm. It's only about 2 minutes. Just
yeah.
I guess you can sort of see it in the jaws.
And where it is, the
Not quite in
the
the blue.
jaw won't be any, shouldn't be any warmer there than it is in the surface ocean. It'll be down to tens of degrees there.
Right.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
just right over the
worried
jet.
that
Yeah,
the jet was coming up, but here you can see the bottle. But the outside
Yeah.
of the bottle is in the plume
right.
and the edge of the plume. But that means the rest of the arm is farther away. so
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. But even so, we'll get this done as quickly as we can and get ourselves out of harm's way.
And so for this, we will come up
Uh,
afterwards.
Yeah, if we can do another sample, we'll reach up as high as we can.
See it,
Yeah. When Chip's ready, we'll do that.
and then we drive off above this.
Yeah, then we'll come up to the 5 meter and 10 meter and 15 meter heights. And for those, you can probably just hold it on the top of the bio box. And the hose will stick out over the edge of the basket then, and then we'll just,
Well, I don't want to hold it over there. If we lose comms, then.
well, wherever you want to hold it, but
Yeah,
somewhere
I'll
inside
hold it out-
somewhere over the
hold it
footprint
out
of the
in front
basket.
the basket,
Yeah,
more over towards the left side.
yeah. How we looking? Okay, that's that. Sample 11 taken. So now if we do, as Casey said, the Statue of Liberty thing and hold it up as high as we can in the plume, is that good for you, Chip?
Yeah.
Let's get you over here.
We do one intermediate and then one high. Let's get a couple
Okay.
turns so that we don't have to move around so much.
Sure. So just an amount higher and away, further up and away from the plume, Casey, please.
You don't even have to move that far up.
Okay.
Half a meter.
How about that? Is that good for your jaw and everything? You can see that your arm is safe, Casey? Alright. I can see the end of the bottle is just there, so the plume's coming up. So I think,
But it should be getting cooler, right?
yes, absolutely. It's probably tens of degrees Celsius now. Okay, Chip.
Okay.
Jeff, could you step to one side? I can't see Chip. Are you purging or starting the sample? Okay.
Okay, now I'm gonna take the sample.
Okay. Tell me when you start.
Started.
Okay. So this one is basically with the arm reaching pretty much straight out in front of the vehicle. Before it was, the first one was down just above the orifice. Okay.
I'm just gonna try to take the sample.
Yep. Casey's just rotating the arm, just make sure the arm's not getting cooked.
Yeah, but do we know that it's not just waving? We can't see the tip. The peg and then the
The tip's still in the plume. You can see in the lower one, so it's still in the
this one
plume.
right here. Can you pan up with that camera?
No, I don't think so. They're fixed. But you can see it in this one as well, so it's bouncing around in and out of the plume.
Stop being asleep. We can move on to
Do you want to do the high one?
yeah.
Okay, if we could reach up as high as we can reach with the arm now, please, Casey. And then if we can pan up, please, Mario, to see if we can see where the hose might be.
Brow light. On. Looks good.
So this is going to be sample 13 super port 4, is that correct?
Yeah.
Is he going to purge first?
That's it.
Okay, tell me when you're going to start sampling.
Starting now.
And then Chip, if we just let Casey after this one, bring the sampler back in over the basket. Do you want to get a background here after this one?
Yeah.
And that'll be a better background, and we're in a safe position for Casey. And then we can do the rising up in the plume, and then that should stay safe.
Another position we could reach right here.
I'm not sure, are you all the way up as far as you can reach now?
Pretty close. Might be able to cook out a few more degrees.
So we could go just a little bit higher later for the next sample after this.
What's that?
Casey said he could get just a little bit higher at most.
I would say just go from it higher. We've got plenty of samples we could take since we're kind of stable now. I don't know what that was. Ratchet it up a little bit more.
Okay, are you
Once
happy?
you start moving, I'm just gonna. I think I just should start taking samples.
Well, I think that's the thing.
waiting for it
I
to
think
set up.
what Casey's more concerned about is if the optics go,
Yeah.
we don't want to be having the arm out extended anywhere. So the fewer samples we do like this, and the more we do with the arm back in over the basket,
It's
the
just
safer it's going to be.
As soon as you start moving back, we're gonna lose like 4 or 5 minutes. So then we're gonna have to move back and then move the vehicle up.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
Hold on a second.
So we're just continuing our improvised sampling. You can see that although our hose broke loose from the temperature sensor, what we've still been able to do is hold the sensor package in such a way that the manipulator and arm sit free of the plume, but the hose inlet that Chip's using to collect his samples is still in the plume, so we're able to collect a series of samples at different dilutions at increasing height above the vent site. So this is the fourth such sample we've been able to collect at this depth. And at the moment we're basically at the maximum height we can reach. Above the vent without actually moving the vehicle, which we have choosing not to do yet. So what we've done now is we're conscious that the optical communications on our to Nereus have been sending us some health warnings that they might fail at any point. Reminded of Andy Bowen's phrase earlier in the week of every moment on the seafloor is a gift. So what we've done now is put the inlet for Chip's hose in such a way that the hose is sticking out the front of the basket. It also means it's in a place where the manipulator is in a secure place. If we do suddenly lose communications and come back to the sea, have to come back from the seabed, then we're not going to have the arm sticking out in a way that's a hazard for recovery of the vehicle.
Okay, I'm going to start this
This is going to be sample 15 coming up. It'll be super sample 06, and this is going to be a background sample at the seabed. Okay, tell us when you're ready to start taking the background sample, Chip.
Yeah, starting now.
Okay.
Port 6, Nereus 15.
No, it's port 1.
Oh, okay, you went back to port 1.
Yep.
And then after this one, would your ideal be about 5 meters up?
Yeah, I think
As best.
rather than taking the time to find some specific point and stopping,
Well, I
can
think
we
we've
just
got.
rise slowly?
What do you think, Casey? What's the most manageable thing?
Well, I mean, we can definitely try to just go up slowly through it. I mean, I know that it's been pretty turbulent, so we make it an elevator ride. But what I'd like to do is come up first, and
And fly forward into it?
and then just drive forward into the smoke, and then from there we're just sort of flying blind, and we can just go up.
Make it up as we go along. And I don't think, I mean, it's, well, we don't know if it's time critical or not, right? But I think we're not in a hazardous position now that we have to do anything urgently. We just recognize that every moment's a gift. But we can still aim to do things as best you can. I mean, probably the more samples we can get low down,
Right.
the
That's
more
what
value to use. I think we'll go cautiously.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd rather
That's
go
what-
slowly up rather than go straight to 5 meters.
Well, that's what, I'm just saying that, yeah, rather than, I'm just saying that there's
It
not
may be
that much
really
time,
hard
and
to-
closer down is as good as anything, so just kind of incrementally, you know, moving and taking samples and getting them as quickly as possible into the bag, rather than spending too much time trying to set up.
Okay, so you could sample on the fly as Casey tries to go up as slowly as possible.
That's kind of what, yeah.
So if you,
we'll just ratchet
okay,
through.
let's do that. So you call out the times you take the samples, and I'll try and log as best I can
Yeah,
where we're at as we're doing it.
and just try
And Casey tries to fight the updraft as much as you can, and
stay inside the, keep it inside the
so
spots.
yeah. So we don't need the manipulator arm anymore for the time being. You're still sampling at the moment though, so you sing out when you're happy with this background sample, Chip, and then we'll start sampling on the fly. And Leighton and everybody else at home as well, just to make sure everybody's on the same page and we know what we're doing. We're sitting at this BB vent 4. We've been collecting samples from directly above the vent for Chip Breyer for his plume studies. That's the end of Super 01. That's our sample 15. And what we're going to do now is basically, with everything configured the way it is right now, you can see the manipulator arm in the bottom left of the screen with a little white hose sticking out the front of it. It's like our own private tube worm. That's the inlet for Chip's super sampler. What we're going to be doing is flying up and basically trying to sample at heights above the chimney. So basically having the front of the vehicle in the black smoke as it rises up above the seafloor as best we can. We recognize that it's going to be a bit like riding the elevator. We're going to lose track of our position, but basically we'll be using the cameras to know if we're in smoky water or not. That water will be getting drawn into the sampler. We have a CTD, we have an EH sensor and a particle sensor in line with our systems. We'll have a lot of other measurements of the chemical properties of these fluids. And then we'll actually have the samples themselves that you will be able to analyze for their chemistry and their mineralogy. So what you're going to see is we're basically going to lift up from the seafloor with the chimney in sight. And then once we get up a couple of meters to a safe height, then we're going to fly forward into that plume. Chip's going to be taking samples on the fly as we go. And we'll be logging that as best we're able. Okay, so Chip's ready. Casey, are you ready? Deep breath.
What number will this be then?
The next one will be 6. And I'm not going to purge in between, I'm just going to go.
Right. Yep. So we'll just go and you just sing out each time it's a new port.
A little bit on this first one.
Because you can, yep.
We ready?
Yep. We did give Casey ownership of the headphones briefly yesterday. He told us then how much he enjoys a challenge. He's getting plenty of challenge today. So we were at 49.57 meters when we were sitting on the seafloor. We've risen up 1 meter so far. This looking down perspective, you can see just how turbulently the fluid mixes and dilutes itself as soon as you get above the vent site. And it's understanding the chemical process associated with that dilution that we're in pursuit of with the sampling that Chip's doing here. Okay, so we're starting the next sample. Time is 13:40. At depth is 4956 meters. Yep, 4955, 4954, 4953. Yep, 4951. We're getting blown up. 4949.
You might want to move up slower.
Well,
We don't have any choice. We're getting pushed up by the force of the plume.
I'm not going to drive down into the
4955. 4944. 4942.
I'm not driving at all right
No. 4941. We've settled out.
Get my sonar.
4940. I think we're a long way clear of the seafloor here. 4939. 4938. 4937. Do we have the basket in view? Is it so black we can't see the basket? Is that the end of that sample? We came up to 4935 there, Chip, from 4956. Yeah, we're still thick in the plume, so we're starting port 7. 1342. We're still right in the thick of the plume. Sample 17. Depth is 4932 at the start of this. So we're about 20 meters above the vent site. And we seem pretty stable here. So although the vehicle is heavy, and Casey's not doing anything, it's still being pushed up by the violence of the plume underneath, but it's much more gentle now. We've just come up about 1.5 meters. We started this sample at 4932, we're now at 4928.5. If you're looking at the view in the camera, we're right in the heart of the black smoker plume. You can just begin to see the silver of the IGT bottles that are in the basket, but we're basically engulfed in the black smoke of the buoyant plume. So we're getting pretty sweet samples for Chip at this point. We're basically suctioning in all that black smoke. You'll know that we're not getting such good samples anymore when you can actually see the front of the basket, but that's not happening just yet. Now at 4926 meters. So we're still getting pushed up, but this is against anything we're doing with the vehicle. Still at 4926. You can only just begin to see the snorkel on the far left of the picture. The little white hose sticking out the front. If we could pan left a little bit, please, Casey. There we go, as the fog clears. You can see the silver of the IGT bottle. That's a good frame of reference. So you can begin to see. Can we come down a little bit so we can still see the silver of the IGT bottle? It's a way of knowing when it's murky and when it isn't. If you just hold it there, that's good. So when it's really... Okay, and that came up to 4924. So the next sample will be port 8, and that's Nereus sample 18 for this dive. We're starting at 1344. At depth now 4923 meters. And you can see we're still in billowing black smoke. We're still rising slowly through the plume. The shiny titanium of one of Jeff's fluid samplers in the foreground is coming and going out of the picture. Over on the left side is the white hose of the inlet for Chip's super sampler, and you can hardly see that at all. So no doubt we're definitely in the thick of the black smoke of the plume. We're now at a depth of 4922, about 40 meters above the vent site. In the first few minutes after we rose up above the chimney, we got swept up the first 20 meters very quickly. Between about 1340 and 1342. Over the next 2 minutes we came up another 8 meters, and in the current sampling suite, which we're about done with, we've come up just about a meter or two from 4923, and we're now just passing through 4921. That's 4920, and we're still right in the black smoke of the plume. So it's been a bit chaotic of how we achieved it, but I think this gives you a good flavour for what it's really like to do deep sea oceanography around these systems. The systems themselves are pretty hostile, both for life as we know it and for our equipment and our technology when we bring it here. But it also shows how our engineers and pilots and scientists can respond on the fly to work out how to make the best of rapidly evolving situations, that we're still managing to get a very nice suite of samples for Chip out of this experiment. Okay, we came up to 4919, so that was only a 4 meter depth change for that sample, and we're still in plenty of smoke, Chip. So you happy to keep going?
Yep. Starting now.
Okay, so that's 1347 for port 9. Our depth at the start of this sample is 4917. We're beginning to see, I thought we were beginning to see the beginnings of the end of the plume. For a while there it began to get quite clear around parts of the basket, but it's gone murky again. You can see the light shining on the titanium of Jeff's fluid sampler in the bottom right of your picture. Shows it's getting a little clearer than it was. We couldn't see anything earlier. But the snorkel of Chip's sampler is disappearing out ahead of us in the top left of your picture. And again, that's still looking pretty murky there, and you can see the smoke around the front right-hand side of the basket around the bio box. So we're still definitely in particle-rich fluids, and that's exactly what we're sampling right now for Chip's research. Come up 1 meter from 4917 to 4916. So we're continuing up. We're still collecting the latest sample. In fact, we just finished collecting the latest sample for Chip Breyer. And our depth there rose to 4913, Chip. This came up 4 meters.
How much have we gone up?
We are now 55 meters above, and we're still in thick black smoke. And we're only going up a few meters at a time for each sample, so let's keep going up. Or I guess we're basically going up at the rate the plume's taking us, right, Casey?
Well, no, I'm driving up each time I go.
Okay. Okay, sing out when you're ready to start this next one, Chip.
I did it, started 30 seconds ago.
Okay. So it's 1349, this sample started at 4910 in depth. And we're continuing up, still in black smoke. This is sample 20 and superport 10, correct?
So what I'm doing is I'm coming up and then I'm just playing with the heading until it gets cloudy again.
Okay. You're just spinning us around to...
Yeah. But we're at the same depth, but it's basically playing
Yeah. It's working really well.
We're in auto X1 right now, so we
Cool.
should be holding our
Yeah.
station.
So there's some pretty sophisticated piloting going on to make all this happen, that what we're doing is actually coming up slowly through different depths that Chip wanted to sample at. And what Casey's doing is trying to keep the vehicle in the same XY position, where he's using the auto XY locking for the vehicle, and then all he's doing is then, when we get to a given depth, he's using the thrusters to change the heading of the vehicle so that it's pointing round into wherever the plume happens to be wafting. He's basically rotating the vehicle until the view of the basket goes cloudy, and that's when we know we're in the best particulate concentrations for the snorkel that we can see sticking out the front left of the vehicle. That's the top left of the screen you're watching from home. And we're continuing this study, which is actually sampling at increasing heights above the BB vents black smoker field, to understand how the geochemical reactions in the plume evolve from top to bottom. We're now at about 60 meters above the seafloor. We're at 4,910 meters. When we were sampling at the seabed, we were down below 4960. So latest sample complete. We managed to hold depth at 4,910 meters for that sample. So would you like us to come up a bit now, Chip? We're at
Yes,
we're at 4910, so
doing the thing that you're doing.
well, we managed to hold depth that last time completely. I think we're insufficiently stable. We're about 60 meters up. How many ports do you have left? Do you have 3 more? 4 more? So 2 meter increments? So we can come to 4908, Casey, and see how stable we can hold it there. Okay, that's us coming up on 4908, Chip.
Starting sample 11 now.
It's still plenty murky. Did you want to come up larger increments for the other 3?
So one of Mike's requests was to try and overlap some of the transmissometry of the cast.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt that we're that into it yet. But I'm not.
Well, we might be.
I would say the last one was coming,
We're 60 meters off the bottom, so we're quite high up.
but we're definitely kind of in the heart of
But we're definitely in murky stuff. But she picked up temperature anomalies that she followed up a long way in the C to D cast. So, but we could, if we have 3 more samples, we could come up another 10, 5, 10, and 20, something like that. Is that good?
Yeah, if we're still in it at 10.
Or is that too many? Are you more? Would you rather stay in the plume and get good samples? Well, we can still.
Five and five.
Let's come up. We'll come up. We'll round it. We'll go to 4905. So that's 3 more meters. The next one. Then we'll do 5 after that. 4900, and then we'll see how brave you feel for your last one. Let's play it by ear like that. Is that good?
That's great. We're almost done with this.
Okay. The plume might be almost done with us too. I see a little over to the right.
Done with that sample.
Okay, that was all done at 4908. Maybe we could rotate right so we can see that murkiness, Casey, and then we'll... Well, we can... So Chip, Casey was worried we were going to go out of the plume.
Yeah.
So he's come down a little deeper.
That's fine.
You don't mind different heights or different depths? So long, I mean, they'll all be different and different dilutions, and as long as we know where they came from.
This is 12.
Okay, let's hold that there then.
Started.
Okay, that's actually that is right on 4905 and in the plume, so that's great. Casey, the autonomous pilot, just goes off and does the right thing even when we're making up other ideas. We should just leave you as being chief scientist, and we'll head for the beach. How's that? We'll see you in a couple of days. That's the trouble with telepresence. We would actually be able to make sure you were still doing the tele. You couldn't just go off for 3 weeks and us not know about it. This is sample 22, port 12. Correct?
What's that?
Port 12. This is the one we're sampling right now.
Yes.
Just want to make sure I hadn't lost track. Well, and XYs are still pretty much the same.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure.
The auto XY is, you know, compared to when we were sitting on the seafloor, we've moved 1 meter in X and 5 meters in Y. We pretty much haven't moved, we've just gone vertically straight up, and we're in the plume the whole time. So considering where things were looking about 15 minutes ago, we're in very, very good shape. We had a melted hose, we had flickering fiber optics. It was about to be a very sad moment, but we've rescued it.
Seeming pretty smart right now. Okay, that was done.
Okay, so come up 5 meters to 4900 for the next one. Yeah. Okay, that looks like about it. 4900, whenever you're ready, Chip. 1359.
halfway to the surface already.
And there's one more sample after this one, Casey.
So what do we do after?
We're going to go look at some really pretty vents. And we're going to slurp some shrimp. Yeah.
BB Woods you're saying.
Yeah.
So we're not doing anything else at this site, right?
No, we're leaving this site now. You'll never see that again, and that'll make you happy, right? Then when we get to, and then James, the request from Jeff is that he only wants to go to BB Woods as well, so that'll be our final destination. We'll do everything else. So that's it. Yeah, no, I think that's going to make life a lot simpler. We'll find our way to BB Woods. We'll collect sparse shrimp for Max from the base of the chimneys. Then we'll try and get fluid samples for Jeff from those chimneys. And if we're still alive at the end of that, we'll do some imaging as well.
I'm changing heading, so we have to.
And we can still see plenty of the black smoke zooming past us. We're sitting about 80 meters now above the BBE vents, black smoker chimneys. We've been collecting samples at a range of heights above the vent site, at increasing height and hence increasing dilution of the vent fluid. Okay, how much would you like to come up for the last sample? We're at 80 meters off.
5 meters? 10 meters? Let's go up to.
Let's go up. Let's go up to
5
5.
meters and see what it looks like.
Let's go up to 5 meters if we're still there. So that would be 4895 would be our target depth, please, Casey. This will be sample number 24 for this dive. Super Port 14.
I like the t-shirt. Okay. I like that t-shirt. There are no pressed people that use this.
So we are, as I was saying, sitting above the BB Vents hydrothermal plumes, or sitting above the chimneys. And what we're actually doing here is sampling the plumes. If you're wondering why all you can see is black smoke, it's because that's all we want to see is black smoke. We're deliberately trying to sample for geochemical studies of Chip Breyer at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We're using his purpose-built super sampler to draw samples in at increasing height above the bottom, which represents increasing dilution, so that as Chip analyzes these samples later, we can understand how quickly things evolve chemically within a buoyant plume. We know that it's the processes that happen in these plumes that dictate what the full impact is from the vent site. Yeah, so we're ready to start sampling, Chip, when you are. I believe, are you in the auto depth?
I think we should go up another 5 meters. We get out
Okay.
of it, we get out of it.
Let's do that. So can we come up to 4890, please, Casey?
Let's get out of this one.
One last sample. Patience, 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 young man. We've come a long way to get you these samples, and you've been out here for 4.5 weeks so far. Feels like 3 years, but it's only been... Actually, no, it's today Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been gone, yeah, we've been gone 5 weeks. 5 weeks since we arrived on the ship. Yep.
3 months.
Leighton got the strongest sentence of the lot. We won't ask what he was doing ashore before that earned him that. Or at least... I said since we got the microphone, since the microphone's live, I'll remind Leighton again, we won't ask him what he was doing.
Another 5 up.
4890. We are 95 meters above. Do you want to go up another 5 meters and be 100 meters above the
Let's go
plume?
100 meters and
A
then
nice round number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See how much we can push our luck.
Well,
It'll just be above the
apparently we can
boundary.
push our luck plenty today. So that's another way to get your background sample. No, there's another 800 meters of this plume, right? It has to. It
Yeah.
goes all the way up to
Yeah,
4,000 meters. So.
we could keep going.
You still think it's too late on GPS.
5 meters at a time.
Yep.
Oh, I'm getting bored.
We've done CTD
Yeah,
casts.
we've done that before. It's called a CTD.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've done it many times, and
Yeah.
actually Leighton's managed to avoid most of them, but Nathan
Yeah, but
and
you're not driving the CTD.
I've just done the
The
calculation.
next one.
It's probably be more fun.
120 hours of CPD. And over 9,000
and there we are. Just a minute.
Is this
We're
100?
locked in. We're at 100-meter altitude. Our depth is 4885.
Starting now.
I would have never believed this would actually work.
You'll believe a submarine can fly.
Well, we're still in the plume. It doesn't matter what.
So when I was here a couple of years ago, when we first did things on Saturday mornings, we used to do our tribute to Pee Wee Herman, where the magic word was. And one week it was tube worms, and we saw the first tube worms in the Atlantic. And the second week it was sheep flow. But I think at this point, Leighton's getting so bored, I think we'll make the magic word the sea floor, because if we ever see it again, we'll be happy. Have we started taking that sample, Chip?
Oh, yeah.
We're into the last sample? Got it. So we're into the last of the plume signals. Leighton's getting increasingly restive. We had to get him a special t-shirt, but then we wouldn't be able to get him logging. And we are now 100 meters above the vent site. We've come up a long way. We've never lost the plume. We've still got black smoke billowing around the basket. So we've got an exceptional suite of 14 samples total chips collected today. One background down at the seafloor right next to the vent. And then 13 more samples at increasing height all the way up. And you can see in the field of view now, you can see the black smoke from this chimney that we were sampling still wafting around the basket. And also Chip's inlet hose. You can see off to the left the white hose sticking out the front of the basket is where the water samples are being drawn from. So we're just approaching the end of this experiment. Once this is done, we're going to be leaving this set of black smokers and driving south to a second set of chimneys that we're interested in, called the BB Woods vent site, which is probably the most picturesque of the sites here at the Pickard hydrothermal field, the world's deepest vent sites. The time is now 10 past 10. We've been on the seafloor for about 2.5 hours. We arrived around 7:30, and that final signal is done. Good job, everybody, hanging that one together.
Boira, coeso I dragichlwch.
Hello, this is Casey. I've stolen the mic from Chris, who decided to leave to get us something to eat. And now he's back. And he wants the microphone back. However, I just wanted to say that despite a very precarious situation we were in, we managed to get very good sample out of that, so I'm very pleased at the outcome.
So what Casey really wanted to say was he had a completely unreasonable chief scientist and he can't wait to go home and he's had enough of being put upon in the way he has been. But that's okay. He'll be fine. Oh, and now Leighton's taking control of the whole situation. So Leighton, please could you put up the navigation screen to show people at home what's going on, because it's slightly more interesting. This is the less interesting version of black nothingness that we've seen in front of us. Whereas for the last hour or so, we've been looking at the really cool black nothingness, which was actually billowing black smoke. Super. So on this map now, what you can see is there's lots of little clusters of fixes, but on the contours, you can see on the right-hand side is a large cone with concentric red circles. That's the BBC mound. Where we've been, where all the cluster of blue dots is just to the west of that. There's the top left-hand one of 3 mounds. And where we're headed now is to the southern mound. So the top left is the BB Vents mound, the far right is the BBC mound, and the bottom left is the BB Woods mound. We were at the BB Vents mound where we took the furry walls microbial sample for Julie Huber at the start of the morning. That's also where we went to collect temperature measurements and plume samples at increasing heights up above the black smoker chimney for Chip Briar. And now we're heading to the BB Woods. Just to explain what happened at the BB Vents mound. We had 2 things happen simultaneously which we thought spelled out disaster. Poor Chip has had to go and lie down in the darkened room and he's being fed intravenous Dr. Pepper now to restore his Texan pride. But we basically arrived at the sampling site. We collected some nice video. Just when we started collecting his samples, he'd had this plan for this experiment to be able to rise up through the plume. We had a first attempt at that on our first dive to Picard the other day. We got some great samples doing dissolved and particulate sampling at a few heights, but we noticed then we got swept up so fast by the violence of the plume that really wasn't an appropriate way to do the sampling, or there was a limit to how much we could actually hold one station long enough to do the filtration sampling that Chip was interested in. So what he and I had discussed during the week since then was that the smarter thing would be to do multiple samples of just the whole water that he could then analyze back on deck, because we can draw those samples about 2 minutes at a time each. So everything was looking perfect. We were set up right in front of the chimney, and then we started getting glitches in our fiber optic cable, which made us think that the entire dive might cancel out. And I'm trying to talk above Jimbo, taking waiters' orders at the moment. But to continue what we're saying about Chip's experiment, because we're halfway through the sentence, what we were saying is we're at increasing height above the seafloor was what we were planning to collect samples for Chip. But just as we were about to get started, we started seeing glitches in our fiber optic cable, so we were concerned about whether or not we were going to lose the dive completely. And then just when we worked out how to cope with that, we then found that as we were introducing the nozzle over the vent, the flow of the chimney fluids changed suddenly. So we suddenly got really hot fluids that actually went up into the plastic hose and melted it away from the temperature sensor. And since then, we have been, we then managed to collect a whole series of samples. So we're now... Do you have anything on your sonars off to the left? You'll be flying up a contour. So anyway, just to complete what I was saying, we then found that the hose melted away from the snorkel, but what Casey managed to do was to fly us vertically up. And now I'd better get back in the game here with what we're going to do next. So let me just go and have a word with Casey. So what we want to do here, Casey, as we're coming up this hillside, we'll see increasing numbers of sparse shrimp, and they'll continue up to the base of the chimneys themselves.
If you like the setting, I would swing. It's tough.
Yeah,
It might be in the draw between. What I would do is I would drive up a little bit on this, but then I would check the right side. So, I mean, I would even maybe.
I would keep, yeah, well, to the extent you can go vertical up with Nereus, but yeah, keep that wall in sight. Let's not lose sight of that wall. And we're facing southeast-ish. And we could just be flying along parallel to that contour on our left. Is that right, James? So then there should be something. There's some light stuff in the distance over there. Can you just a minute, Clayton, please? Ahead, just off the top of the picture. That would actually be consistent with James's idea of this being across the draw, across the gully. Yeah, can you see white patches over on the left there? Top left.
It's late now. It's giving the answer reassurance.
It just went, I watched it there, but it was all fake cable ball.
Well, but we did. Oh, there's a cable right in front of you.
So we might.
I think we want to stay this side of the cable.
What?
We stay this side of the cable.
Right. Well, that's yeah. But I think what we want to
might
do.
have just gone under this. I think we just went under this. Oh, that's not good. Fuck, God.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are in RV Falcus control room. At the moment, we have the vehicle is near the seabed. However, we have a entanglement issue with one of the vehicle's propellers, with the umbilical that was snagged on the seabed from the Shinkai. At this moment in time, we are trying to get the vehicle into a safe situation, and we'll keep you informed. So, objects like fishing lines and underwater cables present a hazard to remotely operated vehicles. This umbilical is obviously presents a hazard to us at the moment and is entangled. Our team is currently trying to unwrap it from the vehicle and get out of the situation. You can see in this image here the umbilical that we're talking about. It's currently on the port side of the Nereus vehicle. We believe that it has fouled itself in the port propeller. At the moment we're running tests on the vehicle's propulsion to identify the best way of getting out of the situation. At the moment, we're still trying to assert whether or not the Shinkai's tether, which was accidentally left on the seabed, is fouled in our Nereus vehicle. Casey is getting the manipulators ready to try and see if he can break the umbilical that's currently suspended in the water column. Okay, so we've managed to cut the cable, and now we're now going to try and attempt to thrust upwards to see if we can free ourselves from the remainder of the cable.